Are we live? Testing. Hey, he's got one. I'm set. Yeah, unplug it for a while. There you go. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting at 2:50. We're live. We're streaming. Are you texting them now? Okay. You want me to go ahead and start now, or should I wait till you get hold of them? You make the call, Ty. Okay, he's on. All right. So I know we're running a little bit late, but this is the Indian Wells Valley Water District Finance Committee regular meeting, Tuesday, October 28th. Originally scheduled started at 2:30, but it's now called to order at 2:48. So with that, I'll see if there's any committee or public comments. And hearing none, I'll move on to the fraud risk discussion.
We have nothing to report, but also on that note, we did have our auditors here last week. And so we still have nothing to report. So
Okay.
far, so good.
So far, so good. It's always good to hear that. All right. Number 4, the rate study. So this is the one where I guess Mark's out there and
Yeah.
we're going to handle it.
Just to preface it a little bit, we did do a cost of service study the end of 2022. Those rates went into effect February and March of 2023. In that time, just since then, 18 months, we have seen a decrease in usage, which led to a decrease in revenue, as well as some increases in expenditures, namely legal and some other things. We do have some deferred maintenance that we have not been able to do due to funding. There is concern this year about the debt service coverage ratio for our bonds and certificates of participation. With that in mind, I think just in July or June, we reached out to Mark, the rate consultant, to say, hey, we need to do, let's do another financial plan. Let's put the new numbers in, see where they fall out, and see what we could possibly do to get back to where we need to be. So what you have is not a full cost of service study or analysis. It's preliminary findings or just kind of a rate update. With that, if Mark's there, we'll go ahead and turn this over to him. We do have the PowerPoints printed out for you. It won't be up on the screen, and I'm sure he'll be referencing them.
All right. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
All right. Yes.
Great.
Can we,
so if I understand correctly, I shouldn't bother sharing my screen with the PowerPoint.
That's correct.
Okay.
We have the hard copies in our hand. Just let us know what page we're on.
Great. So I'll go ahead and take you through this presentation, which is also could take it as a preview of what I'll present at the next proposed meeting next week. And as Mr. Tyrell explained, this is just a financial plan. We updated all the forecasts for revenues and expenses. So if you go to slide 2, the agenda, I'll just talk briefly about that scope of work and the objectives we had for the project. Then I'll jump into the financial plan findings and finish with the project schedule. So on slide 3, you might have seen this graphic before. I've shown it in past presentations, but this is just to emphasize that if you do a comprehensive rate study, there are 3 different steps: the revenue requirements, also known as the financial plan, and then the cost of service and rate design. In this particular case, we are not updating the cost of service or rate design because it was done so recently. That's really only done if too much time has elapsed or if something has fundamentally changed about how you want to charge your rates, which is not the case here. So we're really just focusing on the financial plan. Next slide, slide 4, is just a reminder of the legal requirements for setting rates. We're required to comply with Proposition 218, which has 2 major elements to it. The substantive element says that we can't charge more than the cost of providing service, and that we have to charge the proportionate cost of providing service. So that's basically saying you can't overcharge and you can't charge one customer class more in the interest of charging another customer class less. The proportionality requirement was met during the cost of service study a couple of years ago. This financial plan will be addressing, making sure that you don't overcharge your customers as a whole, but we're also making sure that we recover enough revenue to cover your expected expenses. And then the other element to Prop 218 is the procedural one. So if and when the board gives the direction to staff, we'll send out a 218 notice to your customers 45 days prior to holding the public hearing, which will be when the board will vote on whether to adopt the proposed changes to the rates, assuming that no protest occurs. So slide 5 is just a cover slide. Jumping into slide 6. So there are a series of slides here that kind of give you a snapshot of where things stand in terms of revenues, expenses, capital, and whatnot. So here, these are the budget numbers for your revenue. You can see that 77% of your revenue comes through what we call rates. The GSA fees, you could argue, are rates as well, but we categorize them a little bit less because it's treated as a pass-through for your GSA costs. And then you have other miscellaneous revenues there, as you can see. So that's $17.3 million budgeted for 24-25. Slide 7 is the other side of the coin, your expenses and debt expenses. So your operating expenses and debt expenses. Please keep in mind this does not include capital, because you can't really, capital changes so much from one year to the next that you can't really do a snapshot and have fair percentages. So this is just your operating and debt expenses, and you can see how those fall out relative to one another, these different categories, with GSA expenses being about 19% and your debt service being about 17%. Sorry, they just started to jackhammer outside my window. I closed my window here. Okay. Slide 8 is just a description of your existing reserve policies. We haven't changed anything in these reserve policies for this study. Just a reminder that you have an operating reserve policy that's equal to 6 months of operating budget, which is currently about $5.5 million. Your capital improvement reserve is set at 10.8, which is roughly based on the cost of replacing a well, a booster station, and a storage tank. So that's important to have sort of dry powder, so to speak, just in case you have a catastrophic failure of major infrastructure. And then a vehicle reserve and a computer replacement reserve. So slide 9 is probably the first slide where I'll slow down a little bit because as was pointed out earlier, there is a the rate increases that are being proposed this time around are a little bit higher than what had been forecasted back in 2022, and the capital spending is one of the reasons for that. There's a slight increase in capital spending now relative to what was forecasted a couple of years ago, and so you can see we've listed some of the major projects here that move the needle. There's a bunch of smaller projects that make up the bold numbers on slide 9, but the big ones there, such as the Inyokern 30-inch pipe and La Mirage and the miscellaneous water supply projects and the Springer line. Those are all the big projects that are really moving the needle. You can see that that's kind of front loaded. It's more than $6 million over the next couple of years, and then it backs down to 3.5, and then 2 million. For the purpose of the financial plan, we do look at 10 years, and so we're assuming that starting in 2030, it'll be an average of $5 million per year in 2024 dollars.
Quick question. In your current 30-inch line, that's the Northwest Transmission line? That is. Thank you.
So
Can I ask a quick question for clarity?
Sure.
For the board
Yeah.
members? So the
2025 and 2026 numbers include 6 million for the Inyokern 30-inch pipeline and 3,400,000 for the Springer line. Those are the funds that we both borrowed and we got grant funding for, right?
Yes.
So what you see there, those numbers in 2025 and 2026 look really big, but what they are, they're actually fairly small, because if you take the 6 million out of 2025, you see there's only 700,000 that we're actually at this point contributing towards significant maintenance and upgrade of the system that we're generating in-house with funds that we collect. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, that's according to our capital plan, just we didn't have
Yeah,
the
so-
excess.
So for the board members' edification, what we're doing is we're seeing that we weren't collecting, it looks like we have all this money in 25 and 26, but really a lot of that is money that we either borrowed or got in grant funding. And so what we're trying to do is to establish a baseline of, like you said, like 5, get up to like where we have year in and year out maintenance, where we're recapitalizing our system as we need to go forward. Just so you guys understand what happened and why those numbers were big in those years. Sorry
Yeah,
for the interruption.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you're right, we'll talk about how much you have in your reserves in just a moment, but there is about $7 million in there that's from the bond proceeds that you recently issued, which are essentially paying for some of these big projects. Let's see. Okay, one thing that's not listed here that I'll cover later on as sort of an alternative scenario is this idea that there is a really expensive recycled water treatment plant project that might be required of the districts in 5, 10, 15 years, depending on how things get handed down from state mandates for conservation. We will talk about the potential financial impacts of that project, but for the sort of baseline, what we're showing here today, we are not including any of those costs. So that'll be something that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. If you go to slide 10, this just shows a bar chart showing how capital spending is increasing from the recent average from 4.2 per year up to 5.6 per year going forward. That's the financial plan showing. And then slide 11, I'll slow down again here because there's a lot going on, and hopefully board members have seen this enough times that it's starting to make more intuitive sense when you look at it. But the top chart is comparing expenses versus revenues. The revenues, the background in the green, and the expenses are the columns in the foreground. And so going through the different expenses, the black at the bottom are your GSA expenses, the dark blue are your operating expenses, the hashed blue is your debt service, and the light blue at the top is your cash funded capital. And then going through the same order in the background green, the light brown, you can see that directly offsets the black because that's your pass-through GSA fee revenue. And then the kind of darker green sliver in the middle is non-rate revenue, just sort of miscellaneous revenue sources. Then the big light green band in the middle is your existing rate revenue from your existing rates. And then finally, the dark green at the top is the additional rate revenue that you'll generate with the proposed rate increases. The proposed rate increases are shown as a percentage down at the bottom. So the box at the bottom shows 12% in 2025, and then 8% for the remaining 4 years of the 5-year period. The 12% does replace the previously approved increase of 8%. So really, this is just an additional 400 basis points, 4% over the 8% that had been previously proposed. You can see the middle chart, the line graph there. That's the forecast of where your reserves will be over the next 10 years. So the red line is the projection. So you can see you start at about $20 million, and it stays pretty, it drops for a little bit, drops pretty steadily through 2027, 2028, and then slowly starts to recover again The dashed line is your minimum reserve target and the black line is your target. So basically the dashed line is a line that you never want to find yourself, you never want to plan to be below that dash line. And the black line signifies the area that you'd like to target over time. It's okay if you drop below it or go above it sometimes, but that's the ultimate target, is to try to get to the black line. I'll go ahead and take questions here, if you have any. Well, actually, you know what, the next slide's kind of useful as well. Let's go to slide 12. Because I think probably the most pertinent question is, well, why are the rates a bit higher this time around than what we projected during the 2022 study? So there's three primary reasons, which we've summarized on slide 12. First is, as Mr. Tyrell mentioned a few minutes ago, annual water use has dropped a bit, about 10%. The thing about when you have tiered rates and your water usage drops, most of that decrease happens in tier 2, and that has a disproportionate impact on your finances because tier 2 is significantly more expensive than tier 1, especially for Indian wells. Your tier 2 is quite a bit more expensive than tier 1. So when you lose a gallon of tier 2 water in sales, it's much more impactful than losing a gallon of tier 1 water. So you can see that 10% decrease in usage yielded a almost or over 19% shortfall in that type of revenue that we were anticipating. CIP spending, back in 2022, we did assume that there would be $16 million spent between 2025 and 2029. And now the current plan is assuming 23.7 million. So a 48% increase in capital spending during that time period.
And that
A little bit
includes,
of that is deferred maintenance or deferred projects that didn't happen, but a lot of it are new projects that have been identified or accelerated. And then the final bullet there, operating costs. Most of the operating costs have been really similar up until now. Operating costs were really similar to what we had projected back in 2022. But the budgeted operating costs starting this fiscal year jumped by 13%. And one of the really big ticket items there is the legal line item, which you're more familiar with that expense than I would be.
David, did you have a question?
yeah, the current financial plan assumes $23.7 million. That includes the projects that are currently funded by grants and bonds. Is that correct?
We do include grant revenue where applicable, yes.
Thank you.
All right.
My next slide is going to be sort of pivoting to, what happens if the recycled water treatment plant comes on. So are there any more questions about, we're not proposing to raise the rates. We just want to show you what would happen if you did prepare for that. So are there any more questions about what's being proposed here by this?
The only question I
baseline?
have is for Ty and Renee. Does this plan include any deferred maintenance that we had? Does it include the projects that you need to get done?
Yeah, we sat down and as management group went through those projects that
Okay.
really need to be done.
Okay, good.
Scheduled them out. We tried to smooth it so they aren't all hitting in one year
Right.
to try to keep it level.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all questions I have.
I think one other thing that we made as an objective was to position ourselves so we weren't borrowing money and paying interest, but that we were completing projects with money that we collected. Is that correct, Troy? So that
Right. There's no proposed additional financing in this plan.
But it does look like, and the number I'm looking for is the debt coverage ratio starts to improve pretty dramatically during 2025 and 2026. And that was the goal here, correct?
Right. We want to make sure we're above that 1.2. If you ever want to go out to
Right.
secure additional funding, you want to be much higher than that.
And with these increases, we're positioning ourselves down the road, especially in 4 years, all of a sudden that if we got to look for money, we can do it.
Right.
Okay, thank
That
you.
was another key part of the
Yeah,
plan. Thank you
great.
for pointing that out.
All right. All right. Any other questions before you move on?
No.
Okay, on to future recycled water treatment plant project.
Right, so as I'm sure the committee is aware, there is a very expensive recycle treatment, water treatment plant that may need to get built in the 2030 to 2035 time range. Right now, the cost estimates are very rough, if I understand correctly, but in round numbers, it's expected to cost about $100 million. And as best we know, the funding would be about 75% paid through outside sources, grants, et cetera. And that the remaining 25 million would be, we're assuming half of it would be debt financed and the other half would be cash financed, at least for the scenario that we're showing you here today. These are all the assumptions that we've put in. As I mentioned before, these costs were not included in the current financial plan because there's just too many unknowns regarding the costs and the timing to include it. And so the next slide, I'm going to show you that same cash flow projection with all these numbers plugged in. So if we do assume that you're going to receive $75 million in grants and that you debt finance half the 25 million and you cash finance the other half, you can see that spike in cash financing in fiscal 2030 there, that big bump in the light blue. I'm sorry, I'm on slide 14 now. And then you also would be issuing debt. You can see at the very bottom of the slide under 2030, that 14.5 million, that would be the other half of the $25 million being debt financed. And you can see the debt service band, that hashed blue in the upper graph, increasing there in 2031 from the additional rate or debt service that you'd be paying. And you can see the rate increases would need to be 15% per year for 4 years. And then really that would do it. You actually wouldn't need to raise rates anymore. You need to raise them aggressively and quickly, but then you'd kind of be able to take your foot off the gas for the last 6 years.
Dave, you got a question?
So the wastewater treatment plant, is this assuming that the water district is going to cover the entirety of the cost of the plant?
That's what it would be assuming.
Right, doesn't the city have some sort of a fund they've been collecting towards such a project?
Oh, not for the wastewater treatment plant, only for the recycled water project. Sorry.
And the recycled water treatment plant project is different from the city's effort. How?
So the wastewater treatment plant that they're going to build will be funded by the city and will treat the water up to secondary. And that's, I don't know what the cost on that is, but it's pretty significant. So then at that point, if we were to be given the water and we wanted to treat it to be able to a level to have it and transport it and get it injected or percolated into the aquifer so that we would get credit for it, that cost would be about $100 million. So in addition to whatever it would cost to build a new wastewater treatment plant.
So quick, the level 2 treated water, can that be used industrially? Say it could be transmitted to Searles Valley Minerals and used there?
It could. There are things that could be done. Unfortunately, because of the SB 606 AB thing that we've discussed a couple of times, if we take the recycled water and we put it into the aquifer, we get an additional benefit that allows us to get credit under that California conservation is a way of life that no one else can get credit for. So if we gave it to Searles, we would never be able to get that credit.
Is that credit worth $100 million?
In my opinion, yes.
Probably, yeah.
And what is the credit that you're talking about?
So, so when you get so under this California conservation is a way of life, we get about 4,500 acre feet a year for our residential people, and the additional is for commercial. Over time, if we wanted the region to grow, we would need additional water, and there will probably be more conservation regulations. It's certainly worth debating whether that, extra, I think we get some percentage of, let's say we did 1,500 acre feet that we got re-injected in with $100 million. We would get, I'm not sure of the full 1,500 acre feet. I think it's like up to 25% of what we use. So if we're using 5,000, 25% of that's 1,250 acre feet. We get that extra credit before we're in violation of the AB 606 or the SB 606, the California Conservation as a Way of Life regulation. So because we're the only ones subject to that regulations, we're also the only ones that can benefit. There are other things that we can do. We could replace all the swamp coolers, which would save we can get an exemption for the swamp cooler water. And that could get us another maybe 1,000 acre feet of additional growth. And so there would have to be some pretty significant analysis done on like the cost benefits of, is it better to either replace swamp coolers or to go for this swamp cooler variance or to do this recycled water project? Those are the things that we're starting to go down the path of, and our consultants are looking at sort of what this project is going to cost. I'll say that we were down visiting a similar project in San Diego area a couple of weeks ago. It was $1 billion project that served 500.
The fines to which you're referring, those are the ones that will be levied if the population uses more than 49 gallons per day per person.
That type of stuff.
That,
Yes.
is that the fine to which you were referring from the
That would-
state?
That would be.
Okay, thank you.
And keep in mind, these numbers are very preliminary, because I know that Krieger and Stewart's going to work on refining these numbers. Is it 100 million? I knew it used to be 48 million, but that was 6 or 8 years ago. So
And this is more to just show you what the impact would be.
what the impact would
This
be.
is the route we
Yeah,
go.
all this would have to be refined and what available money is out there, whether we can get 50%, 75, and that all that is up in the air.
Yeah.
But I see what you want to do here. Now, a quick question I have about the impact. This 15% that I see for the 25, 26, 27, is that on top of the proposed 8% we need? Or is that that's what it would look like if we did the whole thing together?
This would replace that chart you saw before.
So we're
Rather
looking,
than doing the previous chart, you do this chart.
I see. So this one includes the wastewater treatment with the numbers we have.
Right.
So you're looking at a 50% increase for 4 years and then zero projected after that. Whereas with the other one, I think it was pretty much 12 and then 8 across the board.
Well, 3, the last portion of
Was
this.
it, the first one, yeah,
3%.
3%, yeah.
Yeah, one
Okay.
of your assumptions on slide 12 was that you assumed water usage was going to remain the same. Is that the assumption you're making for this projection as well?
Yes.
I would say that I don't think that's a very good assumption. The water district customers have been using less water every year. You could probably factor that into your rates because that's going to have an impact. I've heard a lot of feedback about all the money people are having to put into their water bill during the summer, and they're pretty horrified. So I expect that if we raise the rates, we will get less income from our water.
Yeah, we have, what's interesting is we have seen an overall decline, but the last couple of months we have seen increased. But that could also be because of the heat. It's been unusually.
Yeah,
warm.
at some point, people could just reduce so much.
Right.
I mean, you got to have your basic needs and such like that. And I don't know that we've seen that yet.
No, they'll
It-
squeeze out swamp coolers and they'll
Yeah.
squeeze out what's left of the landscaping. And
Yeah.
then they'll find that, they can either afford to live here or they can't. And then it becomes a problem bigger than the water district.
But either way, this last part of this projection is strictly for our edification about what's going on and understanding that if we were to do
I
this.
just want to understand what
Yeah.
this is about, and I wanted to point out my
Right.
disagreement with the assumption on the previous page before I forgot about it.
And I think this is something that, I don't think we're going to recommend we go this route, but it certainly is something that at some point in the future, as we go farther down the path of looking at recycled water and the pros and cons, might need to be considered in some sort of future study. Who knows?
Analysis needs to be done. I mean, if in fact the city wants to charge us for that water, that would be taken into account.
Yeah.
If they're not, I mean, there's a lot to work to be done on that. Basically, just do the same time of cost analysis that we did for the AVIC pipeline would have to be done for this project. So
Yeah.
we can see overall what it's going to cost us, including operations. Because as I see it here, this might be for the building of the project, but I don't see where we've increased our operational costs, which aren't included in here.
That is true.
Yes, he said there's work to be done, on it, but
Yeah,
I
so
see what you're saying.
Yeah, so as he said, it's a preliminary thing, but it's starting to get us thinking about like what would happen to our rates and what would happen to our customers if
I'm
we
not
were to consider that.
Questioning why you put it in here, I just wanted to understand it.
Yeah.
No, No,
I'd
I
like to see
appreciate
that
the
because I know
feedback.
what's
It's
gonna
good.
do.
I will bring up the same objection about the assumption at the board meeting.
You know,
Okay.
If we did something like at a 95% of what's currently used.
I'd
that-
plan for some reduction. I don't think we
Um,
bottomed out yet.
I
If that's
honestly
the
thought you
case, I
did
won't
put,
object. I would rather have a realistic assumption than
Right.
we're going to raise the rates through the roof and everybody's just going to spend water as if that were,
do we know the average reduction in the last 5 years, each year?
that's a good place
We
to
know that
start.
number
7 or 8%.
per year?
Per
I
year.
report that in my normal slides.
Yeah.
It's like down 43% since the high in like 2009 or 7. And then I think in the last few years, it's 8 to 10, 12%.
Well, yeah, a lot
It's
of
still-
people,
It's still going down.
Figure something out based on
yeah,
recent historical data, not across the entire span back to 2009.
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
I think so. All right.
I'm sorry.
Mark, did you have anything else?
Let's see here. Well, the last few slides are just sort of reminding, slide 15 just sort of reminds you the basis of the rate structure, that the foundation are for district costs and that there's a pass-through of GSA costs that make up the two tiered rates. And then 16, 17, and 18 is just printing out what the rate schedule would look like with the percent rate increases. Again, no changes to the structure or anything. So the percentages are applied just wholesale across the board for the 5 different years. And slide 19 is just the project schedule. Just to wrap up here, we've met with the finance committee. We plan to give the same presentation to the full board next week on the 15th. The idea would be to ask the full board to approve the proposed rate increase, or not approve the increase at the time. You can't approve them, but direct staff to send out the 218 notice that would include these proposed rate increases, and then hold the public hearing in mid-January. Implement the rates in February.
And then Mark and I can talk about what reduction to do in the consumption and
Yeah, I agree that, I mean, since we're seeing it, and we know it's happening,
We know
that
it's
caused this
happening.
whole thing,
Yeah.
then it might be something you work into. That's bite the bullet right now.
Okay.
And do you agree, Ty and George, with this schedule? Is it something, it might be an insurgent.
so
Yeah,
this is kind of the bare minimum we need to get to a February 1st.
okay.
All right, I don't see a
Adoption.
problem with the schedule.
No, I don't see a problem with schedule either.
You
All
have
right.
some, hopefully have enough time between now and the board meeting to
Okay.
factor the historic and projected decline in water usage.
And I do want to thank the staff and Mark and all those, because I was expecting to see numbers in the 12, 15% across the board. In my mind, I was thinking, starting immediately. I'm saying, oh my gosh, I don't know how we can do that. So getting it to where you got to at 8% and then down to 3 starting in 2030, which may be adjusted, that's sort of more palatable.
That's us. We under promise, over deliver.
Just a
Okay,
quick
all right.
question about.
Anything else before we move on?
Our consultant has something.
Oh,
Quick
yes, Mark.
Just a quick question about this, forecasting an additional decrease in water usage. I'm not aware of any formal studies that the district has made. So do you have any thoughts or any guidance on what you think that assumption should look like?
Yeah,
I will get back to you on that. I've been tracking that relatively closely, and then Renee and I will look at like the historical trends. As we said, we'll go back in the 3 or 4 years, as was suggested by one of the directors, and sort of get a graph of what we see the decreases being, and try to make estimates from there, and we'll present that to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So
Just based on the fact that we have that meeting next week, if we can get those numbers as soon as possible. It's gonna take a second to crunch the numbers and update everything.
Fast.
I think I have a lot of that fairly readily available to me, because we report that just about every month.
Okay,
So I
excellent.
would fully expect that to impact the percentage increase that you're going to
There will
be
be some.
projecting.
Yeah.
And it might
Yeah, it won't
also,
be 1-to-1, but it will be significant.
it will be significant, and it's also going to bring up the question about whether that should go into the water fee or into the ready to serve fee.
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
would-
well, I mean, we'll just have to, because this is just a, the percent, the analysis is a little bit complicated, because as I mentioned earlier, if we can assume that the water reduction, there'll be water reductions, the simplest way is just assume all water will reduce by, say, 1% or whatever it is. But in reality, as I mentioned, when you have a 1% reduction in water usage, it disproportionately usually happens in tier 2. And so there's
Right.
there's some math that goes into understanding what the financial impact is.
Do the best you can. I know that people are looking people this year are paying far more attention to these details than they have in the past.
Sure.
And it is important that we at least attempt to address them so it doesn't look like we're not being forthcoming with the real outlook.
No doubt.
I appreciate that. And thank you.
Sure.
All right, anything else? I think with that, Mark, I want to thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Interesting. All right. Number 5, GA imported water costs.
Nothing significant to report other than we continue to offer to meet with the GA and discuss our cost analysis. And I guess we'll discuss it further and make that offer again, once again on the 21st.
I guess that's all we can do. All right.
Side related question on this one though, as if people do continue to conserve water, and that's going to come probably out of a lot of that at the tier 2 level, then that also is going to impact outgoing or pass through to the GA.
Right. You should see a corresponding reduction in the GA fee as
Right.
well.
So that's, assuming that the GA doesn't cut us down to a gallon per person.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That
All
was
right.
just flippant. They have been
Yeah.
discussing
That was
changing
flippant,
our
yes.
allotment in the
It's not
past.
allowed during board meetings.
All right.
There's no flippancy. I
Yes,
think it's a new word, isn't it?
no,
flippancy?
I think
Okay.
flippancy is a good
All
word.
right. Okay, move on to item number 6, financial statements. Yes, Ty.
So through September, we're already a quarter of the way through the year.
Oh, yeah.
We have revenues of 4.2 million, which is 141,000 over budget, but you see, we're still having a reduction in water sales.
Yes.
As far as expenditures, 4.6 million, which is 463,000 below budget. So we're currently at a net negative 328,000, which is 600,000 better than budget. I expect some of those legal fees to start rolling in, as well as other fees as we
Yeah.
start working on stuff. So that difference will probably narrow. Capital expenditures to date, almost 4.6 million, and almost 100% of that is that Northwest Transmission Pipeline.
Okay.
Debt service principal, 280,000, and total paid to date to the GA is $15,607,346.
And just for your information, Dave, I asked Ty earlier, can he tell from the GA's financials how much replenishment fee they currently have left after borrowing it, after lending it to the other, what do they have? And I agree. I looked at, we can't tell. We just can't tell.
The
Yeah.
other fee, the pumping fee was $135 an acre foot.
110.
If you can figure out how much money they have left, then we can assume how much money they spent on administration. And I'd also like to know how many years it would take, how many decades it would take to pay that back with the $135 an acre foot fee,
Yeah.
which they have said is going to be used to pay
So
that back.
They're not gonna pay it.
Of course not.
No.
Can I make just a quick comment?
Sure.
Having gone through this and I think we're not doing ourselves a favor by talking about legal fees. The wrapped up in that is a whole bunch of science fees. And what we've done is
Right,
done
yeah.
the most comprehensive scientific study of the basin ever performed. And we label it as legal fees. That's not what it is. The legal fees are a portion of that.
Okay.
But the bulk of that fee was really studying what's going on so that we can get to the right solution. So just a suggestion that when we talk about these things, we really talk about the fees we have paid to do the right science that's needed to bring the basin into sustainability.
I can agree with
Put
that.
due
'Cause
diligence into the name.
Yeah.
The fees that were required in order to perform our due diligence as a
Yeah.
member of the GA, since our information from them wasn't forthcoming.
Includes science and legal and everything. It absolutely
Yeah,
does.
it's
But
good
you're
point.
right.
Yep.
Because if you were to break that number down, if, I don't know if you could, I don't know if you
Yeah,
have.
I
the-
see these
here's the
Facebook
legal,
posts that
and
go.
here's everything that's the engineering science part of it.
Yeah,
But it's
you see this posts on Facebook and, oh, you're spending all this money on, no, we're not spending that money on
As
lawyers.
the former employees
yeah.
prominently.
Yes, that's right.
posting. Yes.
All right. Okay, Ty, go ahead. Anything else?
Not on that.
Okay.
But, all right, so we're on to, accounts payable disbursement. Give us a moment here. Take a quick look, see. And I figured that. Every time I see that groundwater authority one.
That gives your heart a little pity
I
pat.
know.
And there's your fee there.
Oh, there's that
Another
big
one.
old.
Yep. Apparently Ron and I skim at about the same
That's
rate.
it's the same rate.
There's
Yeah.
power.
Springbrook. Let's take the next one. 34 there. Ferguson Water, 88, Krieger and Stewart.
There's a lot of that in there, isn't there?
Nichols Construction, that's the pipeline, right?
That
Northwest,
is,
yeah.
yeah.
That's Ferguson's Waterworks.
That is, Ferguson provides our, supplies for pipe and.
I ask you that every time, don't
I
I?
know. I figured I'd let you ask it this time.
Yeah.
I
One of
knew
us will ask
you
you.
would, yeah.
All right. Krasen and Associates.
That's tied to the, pipeline.
Okay.
They do geotech.
All right. Thank you. Ooh, there's a nice one. Nicholas Construction. Ooh. Okay. I don't see anything odd.
I see Krieger and Stewart came through in the second batch with a couple in there, different
Yep.
dates, I suppose. I haven't seen a lot of Krieger and Stewart. It's like he's playing catch up or something. I haven't seen the last couple of months and all of a sudden they're showing up.
September 26th is the one on the last page.
Sometimes it depends when their invoice falls on our accounts
Does
payable
it?
sometime, because they
Yeah.
bill once a month.
Where is the other one? You okay?
Here's another one,
But
yeah.
I think we had one extra
There
come
it
through
is.
that didn't get paid through Jim.
Oh, I see. I'm seeing three of them, but that's because one of them fell. So
September 16, September 26.
Yeah, one was actually for last year, fiscal year, so.
Oh, okay.
okay. I vote we don't pay anybody for a while. I just, you know, everybody listening, don't, all our vendors are locking their doors.
That's what Cheryl's, that's what Cheryl said today.
Yeah. Okay, I will recommend to the board, payment of the accounts payable.
I agree.
All righty.
Let's recommend we
Moving
accept the
on.
Reports.
Future agenda items.
I do have one.
Yes.
So unfortunately, the district has been the victim of theft of
Oh, that's
copper
right. The
wire.
copper
from-
wire, yeah. I
From
forgot
a
about that
number
one.
of are we up to 3 or 4 incidents now?
Yes.
Yeah. It's been-
Really?
It's been a number. So like,
Yeah.
and it's becoming systemic, I would say. And so we have been discussing, we don't want to do repairs, which are going to cost in the tens of thousands, if not $100,000 at this point, to rewire our solar system. One of the items that we've discussed is what is it we can do that would be most effective to prevent future occurrences before we go out and repair things? And one thing I might want to put on the agenda is whether the board will authorize us to put up signs that there's a reward for the capture or arrest and conviction of people who are doing this as a deterrent. Because we've talked about electric fences and putting concertina wire and cameras, and all these things are very expensive, but literally, we've talked to one guy and he said like, yeah, we put cameras up, so they came and stole our cameras.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I
'cause it's
put in
out
my
in the
building
middle
once
of
they
nowhere.
did that.
So, I
They
mean,
put-
there's not really great solutions out there, but one solution is to simply put out a significant reward and say, you know, these criminals they want money. Well, then turn
I
somebody.
have a
in and put
quick
'em in jail.
question is, this is theft. We're not insured for theft?
We are, but like we said, we don't want to fix it without a solution in place.
Okay,
to
but we are
prevent it.
insured. At one point I heard we
Thing
weren't
with
insured.
Insurance would cover the cost or
Yeah,
most of the
but
cost
we
of
don't want to
repairs.
keep repairing it and all of a sudden.
We
it's
don't want
falling
our
again.
insurance rates to go through the roof
Yeah,
either.
plus you don't want to repair it and have it yanked out again.
Right.
Oh, man.
So this is just, would you guys, the board be willing to discuss this in?
I would discuss anything. I think we ought to discuss
I
any.
think the signs will
particular
be
option.
pointless, but I think that we should discuss some solution within the law that would allow us to
You don't
address
like
this.
the junkyard dogs inside the
I like the
fences?
junkyard dog idea. I think actually would like to see the people who are collecting the copper and from the thieves addressed and put out of business. They know the copper's not being collected legitimately, and yet they're still getting it. It's the same thing with the catalytic converters. They know exactly who's buying those catalytic converters. They need to be put in prison. It's just ridiculous.
So.
Yeah, as soon as we know, we text out to the local
Yeah.
scrappers,
No,
but
but-
they're hauling it out of
You know
town.
what they say
Like
about
time.
honor among thieves, $10,000 reward.
I-
Thieves are gonna
there-
rat
I
on
know
each
there's
other.
hope, but I don't have much hope for that.
When
Well,
do,
it's a
do
diff-
we,
it's
is
just
it
an
just
opinion.
randomly? Is it a particular day of the week? Is it a particular night? Is it
Just
over
at
the weekend?
night, yeah, it's random.
It's the
And how many different-
outlying areas
How many different, all the areas are spread out?
out in the southwest and out at like, well.
So if you were to say, I want to go ahead and hire one of these local guard companies just to tour them, by the time they'd be going all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need a video camera. What you need is somebody watching a live feed with a
Yeah.
camera that has infrared capabilities. So when these criminals pull up to the fence, then there can be an armed response.
We talked about flashing
About being out in the
lights.
county and how long it's gonna take for the police to get there, because what
Right.
they're doing is they drive up, they break a pipe, they tie it to their car, they drive away, and whatever they drag away is what
Car
they
is still
take.
functional.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
also do something to make the roads impassable.
Is there anybody, I know one time we used to have a security outfit in town. I'm not talking about us, but somebody,
Yeah.
is there, or is there anybody that could be, that we could talk to make recommendations? The professionals say, what would you recommend that we do? And of course, they're always going to have their self-serving, hey, we can make money by doing this,
Mm.
but is there a professional? Is there somebody we can call and say, you,
Past
this
is
must be
police.
going on elsewhere. How can we stop this?
There's another angle as well that I think is important. This is a public utility and this amounts to sabotage. We
Yeah.
need to talk to the FBI and the United States
That's a good
Navy
point,
and
isn't
say that the base's mission is threatened by the theft of these materials, and we were wondering if they could send somebody to help us.
So
Okay,
we're
that
probably
might be-
straying beyond, future agenda items, but we will make sure it gets on a future agenda. Do you want it on the regular board meeting so we have a full discussion at the next board meeting? We could get it on that agenda.
Yeah, because I believe the next one, the person not going to be here will be, I think Mel said he's not going to be at the next board
On
meeting,
the one on next week.
the one next week.
Yep. Don't put it on that.
I
agenda.
think it would be more appropriate for P&E rather than finance too,
I
because
think
it's
that's probably-
facility.
Oh,
That's
Yeah.
probably,
think
yeah,
so.
I agree.
Mm.
Yeah. Let's put it.
I
on
was just thinking of the
P&E.
cost, so that's why I came up. in
But,
my head.
Oh, right.
any,
Maybe both.
We'll deal with that later.
but David's right. I mean, we are a public utility. There must be some other protections under the law or something we can do. I don't know what that is. And that's what I'm saying, our professionals out there can answer those questions. There's gotta be
Yeah, I
somebody.
spent some time talking to some of the rangers that work for BLM and deal with this issue quite frequently, and they did not have any really great suggestions.
Unless you sit somebody at every single location all night long. And how many locations are we talking about? 4 been hit so far? Yeah, you just have to set a guard out there day in and day out,
Well, you just need a
like-
camera, so you can have the guard sitting centrally. Having a county response is a different issue.
Yeah, they're not going to respond because.
If you have the guy with the camera, he can get the license plate off of the vehicle and then it can be intercepted by highway patrol.
Yeah, let's go ahead and schedule it for sometime, I assume, in November,
Plant
to discuss
equipment.
at a full board meeting. Maybe you can get more information. I don't know if there's areas
Yeah.
people can call and say. "What's
And I
your
know we've
information?"
been looking at different solutions, but it's just, we're kind of, every solution we come up with has its own downsides.
Happened 3 more times, wow. And we're talking tens of thousands of dollars each time?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's a happy note to end the meeting on.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, unless there's any other comments or questions, I'll adjourn the meeting. That's it. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.